Welcome back to Issues of Faith. We have with us Dr. Lee Camp, professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University, talking about how hate groups recently and historically have used Christianity to recruit and justify what it is they're doing. And as we went to break, I said, I just wanted to get a sense of what do you think the appropriate religious response should be to this? How should churches respond to the fact this is happening? And it has happened throughout history.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is incumbent upon people who are in some way trying to speak for Christianity and the culture in the world in which we find ourselves is, one, to be able to voice and acknowledge the fact that, yeah, we have very often been co-opted or more difficult propagated various forms of hatred or hostility or oppression, and to see the ways in which we failed and to tell the truth about the ways that we've failed and then try to do better. And I think that in some ways the fact that Middle Tennessee, I think, responded so well to this most recent episode is because there have been a lot of churches in the white community, in my own tradition particularly, among them, that have said, you know, we've really messed up and we have fouled up in various ways in the past. And so let's tell the truth about that, and let's try to figure out what are some concrete steps we need to take to do better and to bear witness to a practice of ministry of reconciliation, practice of reconciliation, and so forth. And so tell the truth, try to figure out what we can do better ourselves in the day in which we find ourselves, and to further ask what are other kind of systemic or cultural issues that we may need to be paying attention to.
What did you think about the response to the rallies in Murfreesboro and in Bedford County? Obviously, the Murfreesboro one was canceled. Yeah, which was really encouraging. Right. And there was a huge, I felt like a really big response from people on the other side, and much of that was religious groups, churches, that kind of thing. But what did you think? Yeah,
I mean, I talked to a reporter from the Tennessean who indicated that their counts were that somewhere there was like double the number of counter-protesters to protesters. So there were more people protesting the protesters than there were protesters, which I was very grateful to hear that. And I did feel like I was grateful too that, as far as I know, there was very little counter-violence to the hate groups. And I think one of the things that we need to hold on to in times, especially if any of this continues to escalate, which I hope to God it doesn't continue to escalate, but if it does continue to escalate, you know, we in Nashville and in various places in the South, we have this deep, rich legacy of people like Diane Nash and James Lawson and John Lewis, who as college students or seminary students said, you know, we have a way to respond to oppression. And so with lunch counter sit-ins and nonviolent resistance, a great deal more can often be done through a sort of nonviolent resistance and speaking the truth than by coming out and just clubbing somebody in response for their hateful speech. And so I do hope that in our community that we can say, you know, we've watched this stuff happen in Nashville before, and what can we learn from these people who have taught us very important lessons and continue to propagate, learn to practice that now.
We struggle here in the newsroom about how to cover sometimes these events. There's a thought that when you cover it, it gives them more publicity, and that's all they want. Right. And by that theory, you would ignore it. There's the other theory, you know, just shine the light of truth on this, and it falls apart. Churches have to grapple with some of the same stuff. How do they respond? Do they go down there and cause bring more attention to this rally by just the sheer numbers, or is it important to show up in big numbers and say this is wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one, I would say that I think that you're saying, as a media representative, we do struggle with these questions about how best pragmatically to deal with this stuff. And those are very hard questions. And I'm glad I don't have to deal with kind of media ethics questions, because that's a very real, very substantive question. And I heard from somebody else in one of the major press outlets in the country where they were asking that same question about Shelbyville and Murfreesboro and the decision that they had made. And so I think with regard to churches, it's a similar sort of thing. Is we have to look at the given situation, do the best we can to discern how we think we can be contribute to the situation and go on. I have as a professor, I thought, well, one thing I can do is I know how to use words, and I know how to use theological categories and socio-political categories, and so I can say something. I have other friends of mine, former students of mine, who have gotten very well schooled in nonviolent resistance, and they went down there and they showed up, and I was glad that they did. And so I think everybody's got to figure out kind of what their calling is and what their role is. But I think the primary thing underneath that is not to assume that silence is okay, because we do have a responsibility to speak and to say, no, there are things that have to be said here, and we need to, some way, through our words or through our deeds, say something in response.
We may be at a point now where I think that is appropriate, not to think silence is okay.
Yeah.
It's easy to be silent, but these groups, they're not seemingly going away. For whatever reason, they seem emboldened at this point, and silence may not be the best thing to do. Certainly no violence or anything, but the response in Murfreesboro was really remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, the love wins and that kind of thing. That was a great thing.
It was.
And so there's that. But all right, my other concern is that in this time when it's tough for some churches, many churches of all denominations, to get people in the door, there are people that are saying, well, churches are this or that, and they have this criticism or that criticism. When you see a group like this co-opt religious language, it just reinforces some of the very concerns that people who are on the fence about going to church may have.
Right.
And what should we do about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, from my perspective, if churches are silent about these things, then they are giving the people on the fence a reason to discount them. And if we refuse to try to speak about justice and truth in the public arena, then we are forfeiting a sort of claim to the notion that we have something important to contribute to people's lives. And so yeah, I think it's a very clarion call of, because of the sort of, you know, there's been a lot of meanness in a lot of American Christianity. And if we don't step up and say, no, that's not what we're talking about, that's not what we're trying to practice, that's not what we're trying to do, we're trying to practice this sort of Christianity that's grounded in this vision of justice and truth-telling and peacemaking and a willingness to suffer if we have to suffer, that's a very different vision of Christianity. But if it's not voiced and articulated in words or deeds, then I think we can continue to expect people to ignore us and assume by silence that we must be doing this other mean-spirited stuff.
Yes, I like that answer. Silence is not appropriate at this time. Especially
for people historically who have power. Because if people who historically have sort of privilege or power are silent, then that silence is in very real ways complicitness with structures of oppression.
Now you have a show, Nashville Tokens, Token Show.
Token Show, yes.
So what is that?
Yeah, Token Show is it's a sort of it's a variety show. It's a variety show, radio format show. We do 4 to 8 episodes a year here in Nashville, and so it's we've got a house band of some of the most stellar musicians in the country. We have guest vocalists, you know, Grammy-winning vocalists. We have author interviews. We do comedic sketches, and since I'm a theology professor and I like to talk about socio-political questions, you know, we're always doing episodes around various things like justice songs, or our big show coming up at the Ryman Auditorium here the Sunday before Thanksgiving is always about hospitality, welcoming the stranger. And so it's very much relevant to the kind of topics that we're talking about today. Is how can people of faith actually see their faith as a resource to welcome people and to learn from other people, as opposed to thinking we have to distance ourselves from others. And so it's a delightful, wonderful show in which a lot of wonderfully talented people have continued to contribute to the show.
It's at the Ryman, so do you go to the Ryman and see it?
Yeah, our show is, this upcoming show is at the Ryman Auditorium. We do one big show a year at the Ryman Auditorium, and then other places, some on the Lipscomb campus of the years and other venues through the year. But this show is at the Ryman Auditorium November 19, 7:30 p.m. You can get tickets at ryman.com or on Ticketmaster outlets.
That's great. Well, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
well,
it's great fun.
Thank you for being with us. Dr. Lee Camp, a professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
And thank all of you for watching Issues of Faith. Have a great day, everybody.